I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to GameKeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the GameKeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
All right, guys, here we are. This is Dudley instead of Bobby.
Where is Bobby?
I think he's at the SHOT Show in Vegas.
He is. We want to give a shout out to Bobby there. Thank you.
We're going to have to put him in a 2-week quarantine. After.
He told me he felt like he was swimming in a petri dish.
He is swimming in a petri dish. That's why.
But the good thing is, SHOT Show, he said the halls are packed. So everybody's out there doing business, showing things are going well. So industry continues to grow. So good.
That's good.
We miss him.
What about that story you were telling me this morning about the guy on the airline?
Yeah, Shannon sent me, and she pays attention to like the Daily Mail over there, and there's an article where the TSA arrested a guy with an anti-tank rifle in his carry-on, and they ran him down, and when they got to him, he's like, I'm with the SHOT Show, and it's going to have a firing pin in it, and they just let him go. So only in America, only traveling to the SHOT Show. Yeah.
Wow. Cool story.
Yeah. Hey, I don't think that'll happen in any other country.
No, but I mean, without the firing pin, I think technically it's like taking a...
No. They called it demilitarized, but every one of those guns at the SHOT Show have their firing pins removed. None of them are mechanically sound, so it's very safe.
Yeah,
and it's a SHOT Show. So
it's people cannot fathom how many miles and miles of guns and gun companies are at that show.
It would literally take you 3 days to walk by all the booths.
I heard a stat, been years ago, and it's bigger now, that if you go to the SHOT Show and you go with the intent to look at every booth. Mm-hmm. And some of them are huge,
Yeah.
Like houses. If you walk the show starting the first day and you stop for about a minute to a minute and a half, somewhere around a minute, and look at each booth and walk to the next one, you can't quite do it in 4 days.
There it is.
There's that many booths.
It's amazing. So we need to give a shout out not only to Bobby, but to Daniel, to Jess, to Neil, to Chris, to Allison. I know I'm going to forget somebody. Asif out there holding it down for us.
They are. They're doing that.
They're doing
hand-to-hand combat while I'm...
And we're handling the rut for them, the post-rut.
Right.
That's what we can do to support them while they're not here.
Yep.
Right.
I like it.
I had my granddaughter over there with my dad yesterday, so it was great-granddaughter and great-granddaddy, and filmed a little footage that just went family viral. It was incredible.
That's great.
Yep. Priceless. Worth every bit of it.
Family's always first. I love it. Well, we have been wanting to make this happen for quite some time.
Yeah.
But several of us became a big fan of the Native Habitat Project. Mm-hmm. It's been over a couple of years now.
I've been watching them for a while.
And we've had all these people contacting us. You got to have them on. You got to have them on. And now we've got them on.
We cooked a big old pot of jambalaya, and they showed up.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, so, that's like hunting over a feeder right there.
That's right.
But so we've got Kyle Lybarger.
There he is.
And Jake Brown.
All right.
How's it going, y'all? Just a short 3-hour drive over here. Not too far for us.
That's not bad.
No.
Oh, good.
It's funny. I hear people on the phone say this, like, I feel like I know you, but I feel like I know you because I see you all the time.
Yeah. On the tick and talk.
Well, we've met several times in person, Dudley, but I think Mississippi Native Plant meeting or whatever, and NWTF. So I think we've crossed paths several times in the past few years, but it's good to be down here in Mississippi. So
cool. Yeah. We appreciate you being here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we took them down to the nursery and goofed around for a while, and then we went to a nearby prairie, like a natural prairie site that's kind of near the nursery, and we all geeked out and talked about cool plant stuff and dirt and oyster shells and all that fun stuff.
Did I find those Nautilus?
Yeah, well, the ancient oysters.
Is that an ancient oyster?
I'm not a geologist, but I want to say it was some kind of oyster that's maybe 30 million years ago.
It's a seashell. That's all I can tell you. And they're everywhere.
It's amazing to think that, when you find those parts of the land were covered up in water at some point. It really is. Shark's tooth.
Actually, I think if you find those, it was covered up in a bunch of water.
Deep.
Yep.
Yeah, so when we're talking about the Blackland Prairie that is here in Mississippi and Alabama, and if you zoom in or zoom out enough on a map where you can see both states.
Like Google, like an aerial map, like
Right.
Google Earth.
Google, OnX, whatever. And you see what looks like a crescent moon that
Yep.
covers basically the top right of Mississippi, and it bleeds into Alabama. And I think there's some pockets of it in Tennessee as well. But
It's almost like a glacier made it because it's just got that smooth and it's got streaks in it. I mean, if you look at it like that, my mind is always going to something like a glacier came through and did that, because it starts right there around Tupelo and goes to the other side of Montgomery.
right. And but it looks like a big crescent moon, and it very closely resembles some of those barrier islands that you see offshore.
That's what it looks like to me.
So this was all underwater, I don't know, 30 or 40 million years ago, maybe
Long
200.
But who's
Yeah.
counting? Yeah.
But it was a shallow sea. And my understanding is that was like a reef or a barrier island.
Wow.
That formed that crescent moon shape. And then when that was even shallower, and the waters receded and left that stuff in place. So you've got all that marine life, and it just calcifies. And so we have this really limey soil that's higher in pH, and a lot of trees and stuff didn't grow on it except in the creek bottoms. And feel free to butt in
Yeah.
anytime, guys. But
We were on one over just across the line in Alabama. Jake and I got invited to. I guess this past spring, and it had those chalky washes with all the oyster shells. And we're standing there, and there's Mosasaurus vertebrae just laying on top of the ground. It was really cool. It was incredible. You had this savanna with all these giant post oaks and native grasses and wildflowers, and there's just quail whistling everywhere.
Wow.
And there's a dinosaur skeleton on the ground. It's insane.
it's
Wow.
like Jurassic Park. But that's kind of what we're wanting to talk about. I really want to start off just getting a background on y'all, so everybody can get to know you better. A lot of us watch your videos, but I want to know a little bit more personal stuff about how y'all fell into this, and then maybe we can dive off more into just philosophizing about all things native and prairies and savannas and everything.
Well, I guess it was really an accumulation of different things and interests that led me into, being interested in native plants. But I started out in college going to study wildlife, and then I changed to forestry. And so I went to Alabama A&M, got a forestry degree. I was working for the State Fish and Wildlife at the time. And right around 2017, I switched careers, I graduated and got married and switched careers and started buying timber, and I was a procurement forester. And so I was on a ton of different private properties, and I was seeing all sorts of different things, like just any plant that I came across that I hadn't already learned in forestry school, or I didn't learn working for the state. I would take pictures of and just try to come home and figure out what plant it was. And so I started doing that for several years. I'd do a photo dump on Facebook just of all the different plants that I was coming across, and people seemed to be really interested in it. People started looking forward to seeing those just posts of different pictures of plants that I was seeing. And at the same time, I was managing properties for wildlife too. I had a property that I hunted since probably 2010, and it was a limestone area. Just had a ton of limestone rock. Y'all have got some of those spots around here, I think. But and I was trying to put in food plots and stuff, and cutting down cedars. And where I cut down those cedars just came up in all sorts of cool stuff. And I was like, I think that's one of the moments that like flipped a switch. I was like, wow, like what came up here just from the seed bank is better than anything I could plant in here. And of course I could still improve upon that, but I mean, it was what was there already just in the seed bank was incredible. And so that spot ended up being like just a really cool limestone barren that just you don't find in our area a whole lot. That's where I found Durand oak for the first time, and y'all have a ton of it down here, but
They're everywhere.
We don't have it up in North Alabama. I mean, it never been documented my part of North Alabama, the Molten Valley, and so that was a cool find. But I had a botanist friend come out there, and he was walking around showing me all this stuff, and I think that just started it all right there. And so then I eventually started making videos, and Native Habitat Project became a thing. But that's kind of sort of the origin story. And in the midst of that, my wife and I started a small backyard native plant nursery as well. So
Cool.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well, Jake, how'd you fall into this?
we're sort of neighbors too. So
Okay.
we're just,
Yeah, that's
just
what
2
it
minutes
is.
apart. I just
saw
drag
that.
them around with me.
Yeah, my neighbor had some TikTok followers, so I just said, "Hey, can I ride around with you?"
Yeah.
But no, I grew up East Central Alabama, just kind of probably a lot of like most of y'all in here, just love outdoors all around, hunting, fishing, and you mentioned earlier it's talking about Kyle and seeing all his videos, and it's like feel like you know him well. It's times 10 sitting in here in this room. I know the faces and voices, and really, Mossy Oak, y'all are probably what inspired a lot of my passion for wildlife management. I mean, y'all are one of the that I know of. Y'all are probably one of the only companies that made land management and land stewardship kind of a mainstream thing. And I think it'd be hard to quantify the impact that's made on, for private land managers. But anyway, I got my brown nosing out of the way.
It works. Worked like a champion.
Hey,
Everybody's smiling over here.
You just 12 ringed it too. 'Cause that is near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
Well, good to hear. But yeah, so I ended up graduating high school, going to Auburn, and I studied civil engineering with an environmental emphasis. All along, still had that same passion for wildlife. Still going turkey hunting down there in Tuskegee National Forest every time I got a chance, and deer hunting when I could. And ended up graduating, went on, did the normal thing that engineers do, and got on with a firm, and ended up doing the whole get your PE, professional engineering license, and I'm set. I'm in it. This is what I started it to do. Now I'm supposed to hit my stride. And we were doing all these. I was designing all these large residential and commercial developments, and what I'm doing, I'm playing a part in something that's going 180 degrees right against what I'm passionate about. I'm developing these wetland areas and this beautiful farmland, and seeing all this old timber get cut down. And there's people need a place to live. I know there's a place for that, but I don't have to be a part of it. So anyway, there's a lot of good things that happened. I was very fortunate. Kyle and I, man, it's kind of I actually went over to Kyle's house. He, like I said, I met my wife at Auburn. She's from the same town that Kyle's from, so we ended up moving back there. It was both easy for us to find engineering jobs in Huntsville, and so got up there, and I knew of Kyle. I knew he did all that stuff, and I'd put together like a land management plan, and I told Kyle I'd pay him $100 if he'd take a look at it and tell me what I'm, make sure I don't shoot myself in the foot. And he's like, "Hey, this is okay. If you ever want to do some of this on the side, I could use your help. And man, I could really use somebody who can run a camera, and I could really use somebody who could run a camera that's been around prescribed fire." And I was like, "Oh, daggone, I could help you out with that."
That fits me.
Yeah, it fits me. So I was like, "Hey, honey, what do you think about me quitting my job?" It was weird. So
Yeah, well,
it's strange. I would have never thought a year ago. I would have never thought that I'd be sitting here.
yeah, a million social media followers
Yeah.
later, you're here.
Yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
weird.
Yeah, and still, I mean, we probably need more people to help us. I think Jake started helping immediately, and it was like, he was like, "Hey, how do you even respond?" He was getting like half the emails. He's like, "How do you respond to all these?" I'm like, You can't, like,
One at a time.
It's too much. I mean, it's and so we probably need to bring some other folks on here in the next year. But
good problem to have.
Yeah, growing's good. That's right. Spreading the word, man.
But yeah, so y'all do these cool videos talking about these really interesting sites and all of these plants. And, you had mentioned earlier where you had removed some of those cedars in that dirt that was probably way too high of a pH to grow anything anyway. that you know, so, but then you see all these cool natives come up that deer eat and turkey eat and hold a lot of insects, and it kind of lit a light bulb.
Yeah, that's, I've had a lot of experience with trying to develop things, and the point he makes is, I mean, the stuff that's already acclimated to that and will prosper there is what you need, not try to something else. And stuff's so site specific when that pH is that high. What would prosper there is already there. I mean, maybe it didn't, but if it is, what a
Most
gift.
time.
What's Daddy say? Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Well, if you got that gift right there, don't mess it up. You know.
Yeah. Not every opening in the woods wants to be a food plot, and I learned that. And you know, I was following the advice of videos I was watching online, and as I was doing that, trying to build up soil and make the only opening on this 40-acre tract of timber, you know, put as much green on the ground as possible, and I was trying to even make it bigger by removing cedars and you know, unknowingly kind of restored a prairie on the outer edges. Now, I sprayed glyphosate on the inside opening before I opened up the rest of it, and so I had killed it off. But I mean, y'all see the power line, like we just saw that power line today. I mean, you can spray those spots with herbicide, and a lot of times those natives are just going to bounce right back because there's such a good seed bank there, and that's where they want to be. And those places are still around probably because there's not many invasives that can really thrive there. And I know on those kind of spots I see Lespedeza and you know, cedars, and which aren't really that invasive. I mean, they're native, but they're not a non-native invasive, but they can take over those kind of spots and
because we're not using fire.
Yeah.
They don't. Yeah, they do not like fire.
No.
But gosh, there's so much. You know, I was trying to write down everything I wanted to talk about, and it was just making me more scatterbrained. But there's so much. I mean, we could probably do 4 or 5 episodes with y'all. But where do we go from here? So why don't we just talk about the food plot thing? You know, we all love using food plots, and you know, we've talked about these sensitive areas, whether that be like a glade or a barren. But oftentimes those areas, the soil is so off for growing those species that they're better left being managed properly for the species that can tolerate it. So I think, you know, like some of these questions we got from our listeners, you know, like, so where would I put a food plot if I wanted to put a food plot down?
So that when I'm trying to find a spot to put a food plot, I usually try to find places that have already been disturbed pretty heavily, where there's not a good native seed bank, or a place that has a lot of invasives, because you're going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, but you know, by removing some invasives. And honestly, putting a food plot there is going to help you on that path of making sure those invasives don't return to that area. But you know, you can have all the native habitat in the world. If you took 2 properties that just had a ton of excellent native habitat with a bunch of native biodiversity, and you had one with food plots on it and one that didn't have food plots on it, you know, the one with food plots is always going to be better, just because I really think, you know, having some food plots on a place takes some pressure off of some of those native plants, and if you have too many deer just eating natives, I mean, a lot of times they're going to be selecting a lot of the better stuff, and so giving them a spot to take pressure off some of that native stuff, I think, is a good thing. But you know, really picking a site and making sure that site it doesn't have anything good there. You don't want to take a spot and make it worse than it already is. If you couldn't make it better by planting a food plot there, then don't plant a food plot there. And I've seen posts on Facebook from Mississippi where I mean, y'all may know this. Y'all may have seen this post too. There was some timber company land, I believe, and they had like 8 different food plots, and it was that chalky prairie barren type openings on this place, and there was a lot of rare, you know, grass and species in those openings, and the hunting, you know, it was, I guess, leased by hunters, and they took all of those openings and, you know, sprayed them all and turned them into food plots, or were trying to, and you know, killed off a lot of those plants, but. You know, if that's continuing to happen year after year, they're trying to turn those into food plots. Eventually, those plants that are there are going to stop. Those natives are going to stop growing and dropping seeds. So, I just think if you're going to put in a food plot in, just make sure it's not you know, a place that's really diverse. Because if it's your only open spot on a property like that limestone barren, was the best spot on the property. That's where all the diversity was because it got a lot of sunlight. You don't want to take your best spot and unknowingly, try to turn it into somewhat of a monoculture. I think, people mess up doing that. So
Right.
choose where you put a food plot wisely. I think that'll go a long way in managing a property.
And it's interesting to me. So many more people in our network is getting more into this native habitat and diversity. I love deer hunting. Heck, my family eats deer meat probably 3 or 4 nights of the week.
Yeah.
And
Same.
when I do go, I want to make it easier to bring a deer home. And
Yeah.
so I love hunting public land where there's not a lot of food plots and things. It's a great challenge. But when it's all said and done, I'm going to have a food plot or two on 40 or 80 acres that I can harvest deer on. But just having it all in the right place is very important. I'm going to have some bedding cover somewhere too. But I think it can all tie in together. I really do. We need more of it, more diversity.
Yep.
So anybody else have anything they want to bring up?
I would say that, me, I'm the big picture guy. Overriding all of this conversation is obviously irrefutable. Wildlife has to get up every single day and eat 365 days a year. And if you just keep that in mind, that should be kind of your starting point as a broad kind of wisdom of owning a place and managing it. So with that in mind, that's another reason why I'm such a nut job about our clovers, because they do provide that as far as a food plot product. But nothing matches properly. I mean, some places are just God-given with their native plants.
Yeah.
And it's a gem if you find one. Most people don't know how to recognize it, right? But
Yeah.
I would guess most places that have historically been great hunting places have got that in the index. Just about have to. But what I'm getting at is that what he said, I was just kind of reiterating it again. But he said, if I had a place with great habitat naturally, and then I had another great place with great habitat and also food plots, I'd rather have a place with food plots. But I was just, as much as we're in the food plot business and we want to help people all we can, it's super critical. Number one is that native habitat, without question.
Yeah.
And so also when you talked about selecting a site, it's a two-way street, because you could pick a spot that probably doesn't look like it's doing much. But it may be the worst soil. I've done that. I've planted trees there because there, there was a place had a bunch of pines on it, and there's like, well, there's just a spot perfect. And, they didn't do good there. Well, I wasn't thinking. And what I put there did terrible because it was a terrible little, for whatever reason, 2 acres of soil. And so, to me, if you were going to have something and it was really important to have a healthy food plot, I would maybe look at where is the healthiest trees and sacrifice them, an acre or two of them, because that's going to do well.
Yeah.
And it's probably well drained enough and all that too. So there's things to think through and contradictions almost on every decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, that's why we lay in bed every night thinking about what we're going to do at the farm the next weekend.
Well, I don't know if I've ever been on a farm, though, that I thought had too much wildlife food, though. I mean, I don't know of one. Now, you got to have biodiversity. I have been on farms that had good food plots and the habitat around it were barren. I mean, the one
that's very common.
We're barren, and therefore the food plot didn't do exactly what it should, because there wasn't a supporting habitat around it. So,
sure.
Yeah, native habitat first. I feel like when you get a property, that should be your first focus. Because if you don't have that, I think everything else is going to.
It may
in the
even
first place.
People avoid that. Number one more than anything, I think that's probably why you're very popular. They don't know, and there's such a thirst for knowledge about that. The second thing is, okay, we've identified some stuff. I've got some consultative help, and we're going to reestablish some things that, we've even checked to make sure they'll do good in those soils and they'll be really good for my place. But they're so scared of the initial cost. Yeah. But I'll guarantee you, if you're done properly in restoring native habitat, and you have a strategy in mind, I want better forages for deer, or summer protein content for turkey, whatever it is, deer bedding, and if you go ahead and invest the money up front, the point I'm getting at is it will be a lot cheaper in the long run than fighting the same thing over and over and over again and still not getting there. So my point to people that look at the cost of investing in that, whether it's consultative help, seed, whatever, other land work. I know the fire is the greatest tool there is.
And disturbance.
It's probably going to be the cheapest thing you could do. I remember one of my favorite, like 30 years ago, land managers, before it even got popular, he used to say he had decided he had some great soil on the place he was managing for a big company. And the first thing he did was go ahead and cut out wider right-of-ways for all the roads, every one of them. And I was like, you're daylighting those, right? And well, no, that's for habitat. And so the first thing he did every year was go through the whole place with a fertilizer buggy, a side spreader, and spread fertilizer as far as he could on each side of the road. He said, that's my number one thing first. And of course, he was a shotgun approach. He wasn't doing soil tests to see. But in reality, his priorities were right, in my opinion. Don't you think?
Yeah, and I like the road approach too, because you already got an opening there.
Yes.
You can remove fewer trees and bring in more sunlight than anywhere else. So that's what I do in my own places. I start on those old logging roads and spread out, and when you're doing it with a chainsaw, it goes a long ways, because that's less trees you got to remove to bring in more sunlight. To me, that's the way to go. But yeah, it's really cost effective when you got a chainsaw and a drip torch. You can do a lot, and it doesn't have to be super expensive. But to me, that's the funnest part, is like every property is different. I can't sit here and say to do this on every single property, because that's not going to be the case. Every place is different. You're going to have different battles on every property, and there's going to be different invasives to deal with. There's going to be, you can have too many trees that, shading out everything. It just depends on the place. But if you have a chainsaw and a drip torch, you can usually make a place better. And to me, getting out there on the ground and taking pictures of plants and figuring out what you got, iNaturalist, I think that's one of the best tools ever. You can just take pictures of a plant on your phone, and then you can see a map of where everybody else has seen that plant. I mean, that's just, to me, priceless. That's a priceless tool for a landowner. And to me, that's where I would start on a place, is just get out there and try to learn it.
Yeah, see what you got. That's right.
Yeah, understanding the wildlife value for those plants is one thing that I don't feel like gets talked about enough in mainstream, the hunting industry. But understanding what role they played. I mean, you might have a given plant that's not fantastic for deer browse, but maybe it draws in so many pollinators.
Yeah.
That more pollinators than anything else that is bringing in the high protein forage for poults and
I don't even think you can learn all of the value. And like, we have like 3,000 species of native plants in Alabama, and in 10 lifetimes you couldn't figure out every value of every plant for every species of wildlife. So I mean, to me, that's just a no-brainer. If you try to promote native plant diversity, you're going to promote diversity in all the species, not just the game species you're after, but the non-game species. And in turn, I mean, heck, if you benefit a salamander, more salamanders, that's turkey food. I mean,
right. And we throw it in as turkey food or deer food, but when you say turkey food, you're also saying bird food.
Yeah.
When you say deer food, you're saying food for all other kinds of mammals.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we are deer and turkey centric here, as most of our listeners are. But, by benefiting some kind of weird insect, some hippy dippy insect, you're actually benefiting your turkeys.
That's
and
right.
while you're deer hunting, you're going to see more bluebirds and more warblers and whatever else.
And your kid might not be a deer or turkey hunter. They might be interested in something else.
Right.
But if they get your property, I mean, you've already set them up. You just by managing native habitat, you're managing for everything. And so if they're more interested in quail hunting, you've set them up to have a good quail hunting property,
right,
and they're not having to do as much work and get to enjoy it more with their kids.
One thing that's cool that I've learned, mostly from watching y'all, is in my mind, when I'm driving around or if I'm looking at a property, now I want to ask myself, what did this place look like 500 years ago?
Oh yeah, I do that all the time.
And now I want to try to make it look like it did 500 years ago, maybe with a few modern tweaks.
Yeah.
Because I do like to fill my freezer with deer. But
So how could you get a snapshot into that? Not in the same words, but I've kind of thought about that before. And like, what is the longest undisturbed spot you think you have? And I think I've probably got a place that's been undisturbed for 150 years, maybe, or maybe more. I don't know. And if you look at that, it starts to return to what its original form was. That might tell you that. But how would you know?
I don't know, because, all of those places, especially around here in the prairies and where a lot of these grasslands were, there was fire running through it
All the time.
at least every other year. Yeah. And sometimes in the summer, sometimes in the winter.
Well, I can promise you, if I own it, there's fire running through it.
Yeah,
It's
I
like the
guarantee
old-
that.
It is going. If that returns it to its native state, then I'm down the road on that one.
Yeah. And some of the, I'm picturing a couple spots in Alabama where you pull up, and it does look like it did 500 years ago.
You're right.
It's funny.
Scattered huge post oaks.
I've said this a couple times on other podcasts, but people are so myopic about deer or ducks or turkeys, and the best thing for all of them is to create a place of abundance for everything. Salamanders included, deer, squirrels,
bees,
birds, everything. If you do that, you're going to end up getting more of whatever you're, I guess the only limiting factor we attack sometimes is that there gets to be an out of balance with predators, just like when, people can't even recruit a fawn anymore. There's so many coyotes.
Yeah.
Or you hadn't had a hatch in years because the nest predators are, so bad. I mean,
But-
you can help that some.
That's one of the downsides, though, because some of the best properties I've been on for wildlife, they got tons of turkey, quail, deer. Those are the places where I've seen the most predators, because, that's one of you make good habitat, you're making good habitat for everything.
That's
and,
right.
And so you're going to get more predators, but you just know that's part of it. Now you might have to shoot a few, but if you don't have predators showing up to your property, you've got some big problems. You're doing something wrong, in my opinion. But not there's always going to be.
Oh, they'll backfill in there. But yeah, you're right. If you have great habitat, if you don't do anything else, you're going to have better success than anything.
Yeah.
But the key is exactly what we say: habitat, and successional habitat. First stage of successional habitat, so critical for a turkey nest. And we've had people talk about the 5 stages and all, and it's helped me understand it. But the average person, I think that's again why probably what you're doing is so popular, because there's so much thirst for knowledge, and people are starting to be enlightened that how much of a difference it really makes. Because I've had a long history in the hunting and outdoor industry, and everything has been so instant gratification. Pour it out and kill them, plant it and kill them.
Yeah.
And to each his own. I'm not here to judge. I shouldn't be. But I think it makes me sad that that's all they think about, because they could have such a more, you get one shot at life. You can have so much more fun in this walk of hunting, to be in touch with everything.
Yeah. That's to me, if you're like me and you just like to be outdoors, focusing on this, you're gonna get so much more out of your property year round, because you're not just out there during hunting season. You're out there during the summertime, and you can see all the biodiversity out there. But going back to your point about finding out what a place used to be, well, a trick I like to do if a place is mostly timbered. If you walk around the property boundaries, that's where a lot of the trees are that hadn't ever been cut.
Right.
And
Old fence lines.
Yeah, you can figure out, you can see some real old post oaks and blackjacks or short leaves or whatever right up on where they might have a fence growing through them, but they kind of gives you a glimpse, because that post oaks, there might be a willow oak next to it the same size, but that post oak's probably got double the age on it, and to me, that's a trick I use to try to figure out what a place used to be dominated in.
And that willow oak probably wasn't there 200 years ago because there was fire going through it. They they probably retreated to the drainages in the bottoms where they should be.
Yeah.
Speaking of willow oak, we were talking about how that was one of our favorite small acorn reds.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
Absolutely.
But and the more you get involved in this movement, and the more you learn about it, the more you understand where species, the species site relationship goes. Like you were saying, I've seen in some of y'all's videos where you're walking through the woods and there's really big post oaks, really big chinkapin oaks, blackjack, whatever, and but there's also sweet gums mixed in there, and it's the same thing. That was probably scattered grasslands with scattered upland trees on it, like post oaks. And that's kind of what I want to make it look like again.
Yeah. It's you get the best of both worlds, really. With when you, I don't know, I'm biased towards savannas, so, but I just think it's cool because you got those trees and then you got grassland species underneath, and I just feel like that's like double the benefits for wildlife. But that everybody thinks that I just like live in a good part. I mean, I do live in a good part of the country for biodiversity, but you can find this in your backyard. And that's what he thought. I mean, when he was in Morgan County, he was like, man, I was showing him all these places I was finding. He was like, man, we just don't have these places where I grew up in Randolph County. But then we went down there, and they ended up having more. On your own farm, you ended up finding things that you drove past a million times and never noticed. And that's, to me, just slow down and look around. That's the
Yeah, I would have
biggest
sworn.
thing.
Yeah, he was taking me to all these remnant prairies and savannas that he had found, and these species, rattlesnake master, things like that that are known as prairie species, prairie obligates. I was like, man, I've been in the woods all my life. I've never seen this plant. There's no way we have this kind of stuff where I grew up. But sure enough, he's right. I mean, I started riding around the dirt roads, and you look for those indicator species like y'all were talking about, the post oaks, blackjack oaks, longleaf pine, shortleaf pine, those ones that are that
They're
survive well with fire.
indicative of that,
exactly.
that particular site.
Yeah, you start to learn the terrain. South facing slopes, western facing slopes are more likely to be more dry and more prone to historic more intense fires that would have pruned those trees back and opened the canopy up. And you start seeing it on the roadsides. I mean, it just becomes really obvious. You'll find one place that's kind of at a fence corner or something that was never able to get disked or never able to get mowed, but it's getting enough sunlight there that those herbaceous plants can grow, and it just so happens that the privet hasn't spread that far yet. In those places, you could just about guarantee that there's going to be some of those plants that
and then you find like a rattlesnake. You might not have rattlesnake master on your property, but you see some on the side of the road, and you're like, man, I want to get some seeds from that and get it growing on my property, because then your place becomes a safe place where those our native plant diversity can thrive, and that's only going to benefit wildlife in the long run.
Yeah, I get really excited about those plants and pollinators now, way more than I would have ever expected. It's always turkeys and deer and whatever.
We got some buddies. I mean, they're the hardest core deer hunters you'll come across. And now they send me pictures of flowers during the summertime.
We do it all the time.
We're like,
That's cool.
Totally changed them.
It's interesting that so I want to say a lot of the younger generation. It doesn't seem like people are more polar, but this younger generation, it doesn't seem like whether you're right wing or left wing or middle wing, everybody seems to be in tune with the environment now, and wanting to improve it.
Yeah, I think hunters are changing. It's like, to Toxie's point, we were killing ourselves when we were all pouring on a bag and trophy hunting and everything else.
Eating our own young is what I call it.
Yeah. But this new is like, I'm a part of this bigger thing. I'm the ultimate predator. It's like I'm a part of this bigger system.
Yeah, and I mean
a functional part of it where I'm adding to it instead of taking away from it. That's where we got to go.
The evolution of it started with what I talked about. It's like the guy who wanted to have a better spot to hunt, so he used that, and then began planting things. And then one thing led to another, and the next thing you know, instead of like just the results of that, it became, I call it was a sport, just like tennis or golf or hunting. being a gamekeeper becomes a sport. And then when that happens, you have people more and more. It's a great conservationist move because people are not even going hunting because there's work to do on the place.
Yeah.
I'm guilty. If there's
We're all
something I need to do, I'll opt to go work on the place rather than sit in a tree stand or something. And so what I was getting to, it may have started as kind of a selfish way to just kill another deer, has evolved, and we've seen, the evolution of that through all that we've communicated. Now today, being a gamekeeper is probably growing faster than any single thing. It's not as many people as actually go out with the guns and hunt, but it's a great thing. And the more they do it, the more they get to the point where they get more in touch with everything going on their place, and then become fans of what you're doing and what we're doing. And I just feel like, one of the things I've always dreamed about being able to do, getting one shot in life, is really make a difference. And people always say, well, you already have, but not like we can still today in topics like this. And when we all get more and more people as a collective making the earth a better place, not just saying that, it sounds great. I hear people say it all the time. There's another thing to do it actually. And we can, we can't expect them to do it unless we educate them, unless they know. I mean, that guy you were walking through the woods and missing all this stuff. Well, you didn't know any better. And until someone helped you know better, so let's help people know better. Once they understand the first bit of it, and then a way to continue to follow up, just like the apps that'll teach you and stuff. Once people get that, you're off to the races. And they get more and more interested in just like taking pride in their whole place, everything going on. And to me, that's when I'm proudest, when we see people get there. And my last thing to say is like, the saddest thing is someone has a place, it was their family place, or they bought a place, and then the deer don't measure up to what I saw on TV, or they just get so disappointed with it. You know what? That breaks my heart. When I see people like I bought this place. It's like sacred to everybody to own something anyway. And I'm going to make it the best it can be. I'm not even going to look around and compare it to my neighbors or my friends or something, because you know what? You'll always be disappointed. Just fall in love with it and do all the work and fall in love with the work. And it's so much better time in life doing that than chasing something that you may never get. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
That's kind of my philosophy, and I hope people always get that out of what we teach or preach or sell. And your story is probably as important as anybody's along those lines.
Yeah, I think this generation, I think we're kind of playing catch up with we've got a lot of changes that need made as hunters as a whole. I mean, there's things change all the time. It seems like there's always a new trend, but I think this is the foundation of it. I mean, the foundation of habitat is native plants, native ecosystems, and so we're kind of playing catch up in a way, but I think people end up finding a lot more joy in doing this kind of stuff than anything else. But that should be every hunter's goal, is to give back more than they take.
100%.
And then make sure, at the very least, make sure you're not making your property worse than it was when you got it. At the very least. I mean, if you're not going to get out there and do
not
the
degrade
work,
the resource.
at least make sure you're not making it worse.
I like it when it's a selfish ambition that actually brings around good results. And you said the thing about making your place better than you found it. Well, I would just about guarantee everybody out there, if you are intent on and you actually do, quote unquote, you achieve making your place better than you found it, the better deer hunting is going to take care of itself for you.
Yep.
It's not like they're mutually exclusive or something.
Right.
Yeah.
I likened the turkey management of today to the early days of deer, and this is not about habitat management, but I can remember vividly when if it was brown, it was down, literally, legal buck, whatever, 1 inch visible above hairline, and that's what everybody shot, and they didn't know any better. And then the awakening that maybe there's a better way, but you know what, it didn't take right away. And people still didn't really do the right thing. But all of a sudden, it became a status symbol. People's egos are all wrapped up in deer hunting. We all know that. It's just a fact. Mm-hmm. So it became a status symbol to brag on how many deer you passed. And you became embarrassed at the 2-year-old late point. And I realized what I'm saying is it's not a good reason. It's your ego. But it drove great behavior. And the same thing happened all of a sudden. A few states, and I'll say Mississippi, has long led the way in being the first to require a certain size deer and the first to make a jake illegal except for kids and all that. So the same thing happened with turkeys. The next thing you know, people got embarrassed over shooting, most people. I know there's some people that just can't do anything right. But, people, their ego got in the way, but it made for a better outlook, and the first person to really scream about the jake rule was, I don't have a place. I'm stuck on public land. Okay. And not, but I said, I was just holding my breath. Y'all just wait. Because actually that guy got rewarded better than anybody because all that heavy pressure, but you still had to let, as long as people were minding the law, you got the best chance to have longbeards to hunt than you would have ever had. And so it actually rewarded that person that is only able to hunt on public land. And my rambling way is like sometimes it's our own egos, but it causes the right result. I want to figure out more and more how we can get people to feel that same way about their entire place and know that it's just like your body. It's got a heartbeat and blood flowing through it in its own way, and it's all the different plants and the symbiosis, is that the right word, Dudley?
It's good
of
enough.
all of it together. And the more you understand that and play into that, and there's probably some really simple things people would start with, to go down that road, regardless of, I know everybody listening is not going to be able to talk to us about their place and the map of it and the different soil types and all that stuff. But the general things that people could do, I'd love to be sure we touch on today.
Yeah. Really good stuff. There's a nearby wildlife management area, a good example. The state acquired it, and they realized, it was all cattle ground. And they could have gone in there and done like selective thinning of trees and do this and do that, plant mass trees, and that would be cool. The first thing they did when they assessed it was we need to get rid of the fescue. And they got rid of the fescue.
Amen.
And it was like overnight that place became a mecca. And now that's like, the top WMA that people put in for draws. They do all kinds of cool management stuff out there now, but 90% of it was just getting rid of one species of grass that was out there. And then just all kinds of deer, turkeys, and everything else just appeared out of nowhere.
With the biodiversity that returns, you end up having, people look at wildflowers like, how's a flower going to help?
Oh my
but
gosh.
It's a seed producer. It produces seeds, and that's what most of these species we're hunting need is seeds or insects, and that's the foundation of it all. Without wildflowers or flowering plants, you don't have insects. You don't have as many seeds on the ground. We one of our buddies has a pasture that was solid fall panicum, and the guys from Roundstone came down and we ran combines through it and maybe, what do you think, got 30% of the seed. A bunch of it was on the ground. And it was 10 to 15 ton, or 10 to 15,000 pounds. It was a ton. And these seeds are just like smaller than a grain of sand. Think about how much duck food that is on 30 acres.
Oh, yeah.
And not just duck food, doves and turkey and other things. It's incredible when you look at the amount of seeds these produce. And the more biodiversity you got in there, they're dropping seeds at different times. They're flowering at different times. And that's just the whole process throughout the year. So they're supporting wildlife throughout the year. It's just when you start looking at things that way, when you start looking at, hey, we need to be managed for insects and seeds and biodiversity as a whole, I think your property is just going to improve big time.
Yeah. I don't think the average person realizes how damaging to wildlife those sodgrasses, those exotic sodgrasses are. They won't get rid of the fescue. It's I don't know. It's just strange that how are we so blind to that?
And one day it just clicks. And we were talking about this on the way back from the nursery. Like, once you've learned enough about this, it's hard to drive around and not just critique everything you drive by. So, like, on my commute in the morning, I drive past this. It's probably a 40-acre homestead on the side of the highway. and there's probably 20 oak trees planted out in this pasture. You can see like a feeder off in one corner. You can see a deer stand, and the rest of the property is mowed. And I understand that that's somebody's yard, but and they want it to look pretty, but that they're wanting to hunt it a little bit. Yeah. But the status quo is you have to have this perfectly manicured yard, whether you live on a half acre or on 40 acres, or people are going to talk bad about you. Yeah. But that's not really the case anymore. What if 20 of that was just beautiful, broom sedge and wildflowers and, whatever else. I want to try to help make that shift to where the cool thing is for your yard to look beautiful, but to me, beautiful is natural looking.
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy that lawns are our largest crop in North America. I mean,
what is
true?
Lawns, just your yard, lawn grass, sod
wow.
grass is our largest crop. If we turn half of that back into native grasslands, I mean, the impact would be crazy. But I mean, that's what I'm taking. I still have some non-native sodgrass in my front yard. This spring, I'm killing it off. I just bought my parents' place, so it's been a process. But I'm going to use a grass selective herbicide and kill off my non-native lawn grasses. And last year, a ton of blue-eyed grass came up and spring beauties, and so I didn't mow it. I let them all go to seed in preparation for this. So all those seeds dropped off of those blue-eyed grasses and spring beauties, and I know they're in the seed bank right now. So this spring, as it starts to green up, I'm going to go in there and kill those non-native grasses, and I'm hoping it takes over in blue-eyed grass and stuff.
That blue-eyed grass, we've got it everywhere around here, but I want to say it's like a miniature iris or something.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's cool. But like that Doug Tallamy guy says, he's real interesting. Do what you can. Yeah. If your significant other wants you to have an area of sod grass, you might have to compromise a little bit, but put some natives out there too. Do what you can.
Yeah, that's gonna be my version of a mowed area.
Right.
I've set most of my yard aside to just grow up in taller native grasses. But we got to have some short places, and so that's my experiment to try to make that happen.
That's cool.
Just most of my yards, I just mowed. We did sod the very front inside the circle of the driveway, but I just mowed what was there year over year over year, and it looks pretty good actually. Without having to sod anything.
Yeah, and it's cool what's in the seed bank too. That's just
Isn't it crazy how
that's the cool part.
We're listening to the 5 stages of habitat of successional habitat. Anyway, and the last stage might be like 200-300 years to get there, maybe.
Yeah,
but there's stuff there that when it's cut comes back to life. That's crazy? But is that true?
Yeah.
How stuff stays in the seed bank.
Yeah, for that long, 200, 300 years.
But here's the thing too: is I think that was a mosaic across the landscape. Everything was at different stages too. So, those could have shared seed. Some of those at different stages could have shared seed. But I think for the most part, I mean, there's species I know that'll last 50 years in the soil. But that's the thing is it takes a lifetime to get to that last stage.
Oh gosh, at least
you can. Yeah, but not everything takes a lifetime. You can have a native grassland in 2 or 3 years. And to me, that's the coolest thing is you can almost get it to its highest stage in succession in 3 years, and you could be walking through that and enjoying it with your family. And so I don't know, that to me that's just part of the cool part. You could recreate a grassland 10, 15 times in your lifetime, and
it seems to me this prairie we live in, we just talked about and I don't have a whole lot to compare because I've lived in this, and my other places are so we're in the prairie. But it's like, I mean, you don't want to you don't want to burn something every single year. I realize that, just about. But what I was getting at in this prairie, this seems like the more we burn, we burn and then we don't do anything. We don't bush hog, no herbicides, nothing. Just leave it like it is. And then when you come back and burn, and you get over, say, I'm looking at maybe 15 to 20 years of burning, it's amazing how it's transformed. It's almost like I feel like I'm transforming it back to what it used to be more, and the things that become propagated by the fire. I feel like it certainly seems more productive to wildlife, but the one benefit, because I already kind of was anyway, but I have to admit, a wildflower nut job. And so it's like once the late spring gets around in early summer, it's like going to a tourist attraction for wildflowers. Now, it's just incredible. I get such a rush seeing that now. And it didn't used to be that way until we started doing that, leaving alone and burning, especially when we burn different things in different years.
Yeah, I think that's the hunter in you. You get to get out there and you're hunting for something.
Yeah.
And when you find it or when you see something new, that's what you get to go home with, is some new knowledge of a plant you've discovered.
It's amazing what that fire will do for you, though.
Yeah, and those, I think the more you do it, you get those longer lived perennial species starting to take over towards the end of it. But yeah, it's, if some places you want to burn every year in the beginning just to get, maybe
yeah, to
the
get rid of the fescue.
gone.
Like fescue, you don't get rid of it in one turn.
But once that's gone, I mean, you can slow it down some.
But this is really good discussion. I feel like we're kind of all over the place, which is actually
Pretty
cool.
typical for
Perfect
us.
for me and Dudley.
I think it's great. But we did share that folks can send in a question or two, and we probably need to cover a few of those, don't y'all think?
Yeah.
So let's see if anybody sees one that they think stands out. So here's one that says, "Why is Kyle's younger sister more talented than he is?"
Well, that's maybe some people's opinions, but she built the largest neighborhood ever. She's over the largest neighborhood development ever in Huntsville. So we took different paths, but here's the thing: I've slowly been chipping away at her, and she I think she's wanting to change career paths, and she might help me start a native nursery, but. Yeah, she's giving me a hard time.
I think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So one of the more serious ones. Let's see. Okay, Cambo12 says, "I'm overrun with American holly on my property. It's native, but it's everywhere. Hack and squirt?" I think I know the answer to that.
Yeah, probably. That's it. I mean, too much of anything, even if it's a native. I'd wonder if it's a native. I mean, I'm sure they identified it right, but just double check it and make sure, because if it's a non-native one, I mean, that you might want to get rid of all of it, especially if it has those invasive tendencies. But I don't know, around here, do you see?
Leatherleaf.
Yeah, it could be like leatherleaf
Yeah,
mahonia or something, because I don't really see many places where I see holly. It's really taken over.
I imagine fire would handle that
Well,
pretty well.
yeah. I think Jake hit the nail on the head.
for sure.
Like, I see a lot of American holly, like on areas of public land that they never burn, or private land that never burns. Like, we're going to let these trees just grow and never cut them. It's in our family. That's where you see a ton of hollies, because it's got really thin bark and it's not tolerant of fire. And so that may be all it is. And then you get south of here where all that Yalpin holly, but they specifically said American holly, but Yalpin holly is almost like privet. I mean, it just grows super thick in the understory, but again, it's not tolerant of fire, and that's why it's everywhere. So I would say fire, but if you can't burn, then do some hack and squirt.
Yeah.
Set some of it back.
Y'all probably have a bunch of deciduous holly around here, don't you?
We
possum
we
holly?
do. I wanted to pull over and collect some. I saw a real pretty one Sunday.
Yeah. I saw some berries at that prairie we stopped there earlier.
That's one of Miss Evelyn's favorites.
It is. Mine too. I grew up with a lot of that in the woods in South Alabama.
And they're dioecious, so you'll see some with those red fruits and some of them that aren't. Okay. Jimmy Gillespie says, "What led to the disappearance of savannas in the Southeast?"
Oh, man.
Kyle was rooting to get that one. Yeah.
Oh, lack of fire is the biggest one. To begin with, let's go way back. Large herbivores.
Here we go.
The loss of large herbivores was one of the first things. I mean, we had savannas in the Southeast just like they have in Africa, and those large herbivores help keep those places open. But after we lost a lot of our bigger herbivores, Native Americans took over, and they were using fire. Fire happened before them naturally, but they were using fire even more, and that was managing for a lot of fire tolerant species and keeping places open. When you have a lot of those native grasses there, those native grasses burn hot, and they kill a lot of trees, and that's kind of, I think, grassland's ability to, that's their relationship with fire, and they're, in order to keep fire intolerant trees at bay, they burn so hot. I mean, they burn hot enough to kill even fire tolerant trees at certain ages. So lack of fire was the biggest thing. We took it away. We allowed a lot of savannahs to turn into closed canopy forest, and when that happened, a lot of the native grasses and stuff underneath disappeared. But I feel like there's something else I was supposed to add to that.
Well, you're all over it. I feel like the presence of fire or the absence of fire, both of those have their own respective positive feedback loops. The messification of the American forest, where all the species that can do well, the shade tolerant species that do well, they can survive in the shade that are not fire tolerant. The leaf litter that those produce don't burn very hot. They don't burn well, and conversely, those species, like Kyle talks about, the grasses, those things, they burn really hot, really aggressively,
really fast if you're not careful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even the tree, you made that YouTube video a while back about the oak leaves, and man, you have some blackjack oaks and post oak leaves. Those suckers will burn hot, and all the sweet gum or whatever, those things are crumbled up a few weeks after they fall. So it's
and then even a lot of the bottomland oak species are more difficult to burn, like water oak, willow oak.
Yeah.
Get that relative humidity in about 25.
Oh, it'll go.
It makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
To burn.
And so, I mean, if you don't know, in the Southeast, I mean, I think we had savannas or wide open prairie in places that weren't. I mean, bottomlands would have been a lot of forested. You'd have closed canopy forest in bottomland areas. That's why you have shade tolerant species like pawpaws and stuff in those bottomland areas. And on north slopes and east slopes of hills, I mean, you'd have more forest because those areas hold moisture, and those are the places where you see spring ephemeral wildflowers. And those wildflowers are adapted to come up in early spring before leaves come back out on those trees. And so once the leaves drop, there's all of a sudden in the wintertime a lot of sunlight on the ground, and until green up, that's when those spring ephemerals are adapted to come in and flower and do their thing in a forest.
One of our favorite turkey season plants is the mayapple.
Yep.
Mayapple.
Spring ephemeral. And so then everywhere else, though, all those drier south slopes, west slopes, flat areas, flat dry areas were either wide open prairie or savannas, and that was how it was across most of the Southeast, and I think people don't realize that. That's a very common misconception, that everywhere used to be closed canopy forest.
Yeah, the myth of the squirrel is what
Dwayne
Estes talks about. I feel like that was like a cultural thing, because I experienced that. I heard at some point, have y'all ever heard the statement that back in the day a squirrel could start on the Atlantic coast and hop from tree to tree on all the way to the Mississippi River and never touch the ground? I feel like that's something a lot of people heard growing up.
I've heard them say that about American chestnut too, that they could just jump from American chestnut to American chestnut.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's another version.
But if you read a bunch of old accounts, like I've got a buddy that's an archaeologist, and you can go to the microfilm at the library and read newspapers from the 1800s or whatever, and some of this was a 3-county area of nothing but grasslands. Just the drainages were wooded.
Do y'all have a resource here? I'm sure it's available. I know Alabama and Georgia have this, but there's a public resource where you can find aerial imagery that they did right around the beginning, kind of like the early 40s. And man, it's really, really interesting to look at that stuff, because you can see in areas now that are completely closed canopy, I can go and look at those, especially the ones where I still find those relic blackjack oak and post oaks, and I could see individual trees, and I could see that tannish, that grassland look in between them.
Wow.
And so it's you're not going to see that everywhere.
The old soil books,
Yeah,
were taken in the 60s.
Yeah.
That was about as far back as I've been able to go to discern. And you could see big open areas, and there was a footprint, but I don't know how long before, but there's one in particular, there's about a 1,500 acre block. I was like, I know that had to be timbered. It's in a conflux of two big creeks, but it was farmland. But when you looked at that, there's these big black bands all the way across.
Yeah.
Where they burned off the windrows or whatever after they cut everything and pushed it up, and then you can see all the way. This is a 1,500 acre open area, but you could see that footprint of like having it was timbered and they turned it into farmland.
It's amazing how long that charcoal could stay in the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my farm. We long time ago went to the courthouse and got a topo map, and like you said, it was probably done in the 40s, and it was pretty much no trees. Just the drainages in the bottoms. Yeah. Everything else was what old folks refer to as that sage grass everywhere.
Yeah.
And I've got a neighbor that says he remembers in February they would call it the burning of the grasses, and they would get on horses with matches and just light matches and throw them out.
We've got a cultural amnesia, don't we?
There's no doubt about that.
All right, let's find another good question here. Anybody?
I've got one.
Okay.
So these guys, I've asked this before. No one's really ever put it out there, but I've always said this would be like getting people to do stuff that was really good for your habitat, for your place, for your natives. But it might be a selfish reason. So what, in your mind, could you name a couple of native plants that actually produce their seed in the spring, like April 1st or so? So my point is that would be great for turkey populations. And not only having them on your place to hunt, but raising them and stuff too. So what are some of your favorites? Because there are some I've noticed, I don't even know what to call them. There's the one that grows in the
some of the
field.
panicums and stuff like.
Yeah, but I saw last year. I saw looked like a pea, and it was the youth weekend. I was out there with Rodney in some traditionally super big forested, mature timber, and I looked down in a couple of spots. There was this beautiful little white flower growing on a plant, and I recognized it had to be some type of pea.
That was we looked that up, and it was I'm pretty sure it was one of the native vetches.
Yeah, and so my point is, but if that was flowering at the 1st of March, it was putting the seed out in turkey season.
Yeah.
Carolina vetch is one that
may have been what it was.
I think that is.
So is that true, and is that a valuable seed? Now, if so, then how do we get down the road with that?
Yeah.
Add that to the list, guys.
Yeah. Sedges, that's another good one. I think that's those are, you might not realize it, but they flower. They are actually flowering and putting off seed really early.
Well, a lot of them, the seed lasts so well. I notice all the sedges that do go dormant for the winter. It seems like that's some of the, as far as very few of them maintain their seed and, the integrity or whatever, all that through the winter and all, but those do. They look like it to me, they do.
Yeah, and I think turkeys will even eat like their seed that's not even mature yet.
Wow.
We looked in that crop of that bird you killed in National Forest in Talladega last year, and it was a lot of sedge seed in there.
And there wasn't. It was all forested around there pretty much. Yeah. So he was getting it somewhere where there's really spaced out. Some of those sedges can grow like spring ephemerals in really shaded forests. It's closed canopy forests. But if you're in a grassland, if you burn and then the spring, the first thing that's going to green up is usually the ones that especially in the fall. If you burn in the fall, you're going to get those earlier blooming wildflower species coming in first. And so if you burn like later on in the spring, you're going to have your managed for native warm season grasses later on in the year. But I burn anywhere from October, November, and we're doing burns last week on some of our places, but I just kind of mix it up for that reason. So things are maturing at different times, and that's favoring different wildflower and grass species that are going to see it at different times.
Yeah.
But I
That
mix
was
it up.
actually a question from a listener.
Yeah.
Talk about what time of year to burn to get what types of plants that come back.
Yeah, Dudley, you were talking about this being the we were walking around that prairie, this being the time of year for the basil rosettes on those. I mean, at the nursery, there were a lot of green rosette leaves still out. I mean, some of them, we had that really hard freeze, but, there were still some warm season species that had those green basil leaves that just kind of sit there and wait for their opportunity. And
Yeah.
it seemed like those being set back by a spring fire probably.
Yeah, so to our listeners that don't know, a basil rosette is just the wintering portion of certain plants that just hangs out really close to the ground and gathers energy. And then once its growing season hits, it'll send up a flower or whatever. But, and they were green, We were down to close to 0 Fahrenheit a couple weeks ago. Well, those basil rosettes were in good shape,
Yeah.
feeding deer and rabbits and whatever else.
Looked like a spring mix from Publix, didn't it?
Yeah.
Super salad bar.
Let's see. You had mentioned Dwayne from the southern.
Yeah, Southeastern Grassland.
Yeah. What are
Institute.
some? Yes, that's a great group spreading good information. Are there? Somebody else asked about books. Man, BK about books for learning about native plants. But I'd like to expand that. What are some other organizations or websites or social media? Anything you can think of.
Yeah. So I mean, Southeastern Grassland Initiative or Institute's a great one. There's a lot of Facebook groups about native plants. I started one a couple years ago.
Native habitat managers.
Yeah, native habitat managers, and it's a great one. It's and it's a bunch of hunters that started it, but it's not just for hunters. I mean, because we wanted botanists and foresters and native plant and folks in there as well, just because we wanted their knowledge. So it's a mix of people, and you can ask any kind of question, landscaping all the way to managing for certain species, and as long as it's native habitat related. But I think iNaturalist is one of the best. I mentioned it earlier, but you can, if you know your physiographic region. We live in the Molten Valley. Jake's from the Piedmont originally, and y'all are in the Black Belt. You can.
My farm's in the Luss Bluffs.
Yeah, you can type in if there's not a project on iNaturalist, you can start one, and other people can add plants to it. But there's already one probably for the Black Belt. Molten Valley. There's Molten Valley savannas, Molten Valley limestone barrens, and so people who have properties and have those sort of ecosystems, or even if they're just driving around roadsides, will add plants to those projects, and then you have a complete list of pretty much of plants that you can find in your area, wildflowers, grasses, all sorts of stuff. And I think that's an invaluable tool, and not only just for plant identification, but for also better understanding your physiographic region where you live. But yeah, SGI, and there's all sorts of books. I mean, there's native plants of the Southeast. There's one called Garden Revolution, and it's just more so about like turning your lawn into native stuff, but it's really has a lot of good information about doing native plantings, how to time fires and how to time the native plantings, and how to battle certain invasives and stuff. That's a good one, but there's all sorts of information out there.
Yeah, Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Research Center.
That's a good one.
You looked at this iNaturalist thing? This thing's great.
It's cool.
Yeah.
Downloading it now.
Yeah, you can just hit explore and just look at a map and see what everybody's seeing.
Yeah.
God, this is.
And the more
Don't look at
people,
this. It's going to take up a bunch
the
of
more people that use it, the better it gets.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at this.
And they use it for science. I mean, it's all used for research. But I found plants and I was the first person to put them on iNaturalist for the whole state of Alabama. So when that happens, you've come across something that's pretty uncommon.
Yeah.
But if you do post at your home, people can see where you live. So just keep that in mind.
Like me and Dudley on these.
I'm out.
Felt like we were Columbus discovered America every time we find a hybrid oak that wasn't been reported yet somewhere. It's like we would look up, and there's no name for it. That means nobody's discovered it yet.
Yeah, and we did.
We have. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, you feel special.
We need to get that thing named. them named.
Yeah, don't.
What are they? Or can you talk about
We'll talk. We'll talk.
We'll talk
it?
offline.
Afterwards, yeah.
A lot at stake there.
Yeah, I got an oak to show you too.
We did have fun looking at the hybrids at the nursery that were sprouting out of the nut-alls and the swamp chestnuts and that kind of thing.
He gets to look at all of that and pick them out.
Yeah.
They have one that's really cool that you're going to want to see.
Yeah.
It might have some Durand in it. So
We'll see.
anyway, what other questions here?
Hey, I just want to say y'all's nursery was the first place I ever bought native plants. This 6 or 7 years ago, I
Thank you.
bought trees
Well, thanks.
from y'all, persimmons, and I think I bought some plums and nut-all oak, live oaks, bur oaks. I bought several things, but y'all are the first native nursery I ever bought from, and then
Well, it all started in his backyard. I promise you that.
Yeah.
There's 1,000 trees going.
Hobby's gone wild.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's what I've always called it.
I'm good at that too.
Well, have you ever bought a beetle? You hadn't lived if you hadn't bought one of our Beatles oaks. You need to get one of those.
I hadn't.
Yeah, that is a favorite.
That was kind of the like light bulb went off. This is here. They're here somewhere.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's a cross between a white oak and a swamp chestnut oak.
Oh,
Alba
okay,
Michua.
man.
Just
Oh, that's
do it all
gotta be-
around.
That's a cool. That's a cool
Can't
tree.
beat it. That's
Jeez.
right.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
So I have a listener that was asking about burning hardwoods and how to make it safe. And how do we hit on that a little bit?
I just
Yeah.
burn them.
Yeah.
You know.
And believe it or not, there's some professionals out there that'll tell you you shouldn't burn in hardwoods, and they're lying. If you can look at the leaves of upland hardwood species, and you can't tell me they don't want fire. But I just if you're worried about scarring trees or something, which I think on most of them you don't have to worry, because I've seen some hot fires through some upland hardwoods and haven't damaged them at all, especially if it's just leaf litter.
Yeah, I mean, unless you have just a crazy amount of fuel,
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
No,
Well-
if it's a bunch of native grasses, that might be where you could, but
You
it's
might.
going to have to be it'd be a really dry day and probably conditions you shouldn't be burning in anyways.
But I mean, yeah, it's a two-edged sword. If you think you're going to have a commercial timber value that you want to protect someday, okay, maybe. But if not, just burn it, because I believe the fire will transform
Yeah.
it into what's best and highest use for nature.
Yeah.
I've got a particular place here that we burn. It's really wet, but it's got a beautiful, been thinned twice, stand of pines wood. That's getting to a point where, the time clock's ticking to final harvest, but I don't like to do that. I like to keep them as long as I can, because some really cool stuff happens with that much sunlight hitting the ground. But we burn it, and Mac's been out there, you know what I'm talking about, where he cut his teeth burning. And I mean hot, just burning. And every year, boom, and I'm pretty sure they're all cherry barks. They just come right back. And I mean, they were burnt to a crisp. And it does not bother them one bit. In fact, they get thicker and thicker all the time.
Yeah.
Almost like it's killing other stuff, and they're taking off just like pines. But they are obviously very tolerant to fire.
Especially for a bottomland species. I have them in my pasture, and it seems like they just love the same areas you see water oaks and willow oaks and stuff. But
they
they got those leaves that love to burn.
And you
I
find them further up the hill too.
Yeah,
So that
yeah,
may be
yeah,
an
that's
indication
true.
that they can handle burning a little bit
I
better.
can assure you these can handle burning. I
And
mean,
they've
it's
got
crazy.
they've got a bigger lobe to leaf as well. So
Yeah.
who knows?
Dormant seasons also, that's which it's hard
Yes.
to get stuff to burn under hardwoods and
Yeah.
in the growing season because it's so shady. But yeah, I mean,
If you're
dormant
worried about
season.
damaging, then that's a good thing. Do it on a cold day when it's like under 50, and then you really don't have to worry about
Yeah.
anything. But I don't worry about it anyways. Most forests, you could probably kill a few
Yeah.
trees. It'd probably help you out.
That
Right.
just saves us some herbicide or chainsaw work.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
the fire can take a couple.
Well, my
hours.
buddy's a great timber harvester and grower of timber too. And he, it came up in beetles, and there's a dead one and a dead one, and people would be freaking out. He said, "I don't know what you're sweating." He said, "Those that die, first of all, are going to create better diversity on your place. Okay. Second of all, over a very short period of time, you're going to make up that volume instantly with the trees right by it anyway. So quit sweating.
Yeah.
That you lost a half acre even wouldn't hurt a thing.
Yep.
So we had a podcast very recently where we were talking about Native Americans and artifacts and how to properly do things. And anyway, now we have a question from a listener that says, do you try to include Indigenous people in your work?
Yeah, I think it'd be so cool to burn with some Indigenous folks. That'd be like a dream of mine. I think it'd be, because they're the ones who really, their ancestors have been burning here for years, but they've reached out to me, several different tribes, recently one from Oklahoma, but there was one locally that reached out. They had they were like, we know that in the past, I guess their ancestors created necklaces using this certain type of seed, and it was really glossy, and they showed me, they had sent some pictures or something, and I'm pretty sure it was like wild white indigo. That's what it looked, or like any of those indigos that make the those seed pods, and they have like the little legume. I mean, they look like tiny little kidney beans in there, but they're real glossy and really hard. If you've ever seen them, they're just real hard. I mean, when you got them in a box together, they jingle like. I mean, it's weird how, but they're like really tough. I think that's what they were, but they just couldn't figure out what the seed it came from, and so I think that's what it was. I hope I was right, but that's the closest I've come to working with them.
Yeah, we have some Chickasaws come to our office from time to time.
Yeah.
Great group of folks. They're doing some stuff north of us here.
Mine was going to be all around fescue, in relation to, but I think we've kind of covered a lot of that. I mean, it's just burn, burn, burn.
Yeah, that's every question y'all ask me in here that'll be the answer.
Burn, burn, burn. All right, cool.
Yeah. Hey, burn, burn. When in doubt, burn.
So I'd like to ask you, we're dealing with invasives. Can you defend the use of herbicides to get rid of invasives? Is there a best way to put that to help put that in perspective?
Can I give him 1-2 word name to put that in perspective too?
Sure.
Cogongrass, maybe.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
God, that stuff is rough.
But I've heard you mention it on your podcast and on your videos.
So you just got a half-acre patch. It just blew up, and it's going to engulf your place. What do you do?
Yeah. You can't tell me
it's
you're not
different.
If you just leave it be,
You got
the
problems.
damage you're doing to that ecosystem by not using herbicide. I mean, I don't care if you have to treat it 100 times. It's better than just letting it take over.
You would be, I believe
But
now,
you can
having
do it.
dealt with it for so long, you'd be better to neutralize the soil there if it took that.
Yeah.
For, the stuff that takes a couple of years out of the life of that,
Yeah.
than to let it keep growing. And I honestly, we're to an emergency standpoint on
bad.
me.
Yeah.
I need some advice.
Yeah.
That's one reason I brought that up.
Yeah.
Well, we were out on where we seen the Mosasaurus skeleton. He's been battling it for years, and I saw some sites. Jake and I both did. I mean, where he had treated it with glyphosate. Was it just glyphosate, or was it mixed?
I think
with,
he did a cocktail, glyphosate and imazapyr.
That's what I thought.
And,
Yep,
I
that's
don't-
what we did.
That's what we do.
Ammonium sulfate.
Yeah.
And multiple times.
Yep, and in the same year, and this was like 2 or 3 years after he started treating. That site had liatris and gray-headed coneflower,
And he
native
got
grasses.
rid of it.
Yeah, no
What-
Cogongrass.
Do you
all
think
native stuff.
the key is that he continued throughout the year?
Yeah, multiple times
Got
in a
to.
year.
Yeah.
So would you think it would be good to, if you had it and you burn it, that doesn't spread it necessarily, does it?
No, it
But
does
you need
like
to
it.
mark the spot so you know exactly what, because when it
Yeah.
first greens back up, it's going to be most
That's
vulnerable, I
when
would
they spray.
think.
Yeah, yeah. And,
But you might want to flag it so you know exactly where to spray.
Yeah,
And the longer it has that surface area to photosynthesize, the more it can,
First time I've ever done it, I just clear cut up like 105 acres. But it had to have it. It was some giant pines.
yeah.
And we almost lost some to a tornado too. And I'm gonna do some cool things with the way they said, "Where you gonna replant it?" And I said, "Well, I'm gonna actually turn part of it into like a little meadow, and I'm gonna let part of it just grow back up in whatever the hell it wants to grow back up in, and then I'm gonna reforest some hardwoods, and I'm gonna put some pines back. But I'm gonna diversify that." But my point in saying all along, I was defending my clear cut. It's got 2 spots that have been rapidly expanding of Cogongrass, and now's the time where it's going to just take off like a wildfire.
Yeah.
to do something. So this coming year, I've got to control that right there.
Is
Yeah.
it just one spot?
No, there's a couple.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
One big one, but there's a couple. And I hate to say, people, that's how I get spread around. That guy's equipment's taking it somewhere else. But
Yeah, we've got it up in North Alabama now, and we just had Jake sprayed our first patch of it this year that we've ever had to spray. And it's all on the highways because the same highway mowing crews going from Montgomery all the way to North Alabama to the Tennessee line, and they're spreading it all along the way. I mean, that is a horrible one. But for I post a lot of videos about where I say, hey, I treated it with herbicide, and people go off because I cast a pretty broad net, and I've got a ton of
It
different
ain't
followers.
just like good old boy
No,
hunters.
no.
Yeah.
And so I have to explain myself. It's either treat it with herbicide right now, or we're going to leave it for the next generation for them to have to treat 10 times the amount or 100 times.
or lose the place. You
Yeah,
talk
lose
about
it.
it's
Lose it
crazy.
completely.
And the damage that's going to do to that ecosystem is far more
Yes.
than any herbicide could ever do. And it's the same thing we've done to fire. We've made herbicide a bad word, just like we did fire, but they're both tools. I mean, lawnmowers, chainsaws,
Well, it's just
leaf
the
blowers,
overuse.
they're all tools.
All of it's just the overuse of them is
Yeah.
the issue. Like herbicides, this big broad use of it. Well, you're talking about specific spots, exactly where it's growing that you're going to target. That's a whole
Yeah.
different thing.
It's like it's my worst enemy. I've seen whole entire populations of plants disappear because a road crew sprayed the roadside, but that's because they didn't know what they're spraying. If you know what you're spraying and you're out there killing invasives, that's a good thing.
And
As far
stay
as
with
putting
it,
specifics, I don't really want to make too many herbicide
I know
recommendations.
one
Yeah, on
treatment's
there,
never
okay.
worked.
Read and follow the label is
Okay. Okay.
what I like to say on that.
Well, I'm waiting to, everybody wants a magic cure. I'm waiting to see, maybe they finally found something it doesn't like.
Hey, there's been, I was talking to somebody the other day. They're like, there's some discussion on like does like bamboo trespass if you have it on your property and you allow it to spread to your neighbors? I mean, it's probably too late to figure that out with Cogongrass, but there should have been something in the beginning to say, hey,
Right.
who planted this stuff, and because they should pay for it. I mean, it's,
There was y'all know better than me, but there was like the Southeastern Cogongrass Task Force thing, and 15 years ago,
Yeah.
12, I hear about it. I hear
Very
about it. One of my dear friend's son is a very, very successful forester, and I asked him about it. He was a part of that. He said, no, they gave up. They threw the towel in and just they disbanded. They have given up.
yeah.
And I mean, I've seen roadsides down in South Alabama, Mississippi, going down towards the coast or somewhere, and just
It's everywhere.
for miles.
It's like
taken
leopard patches
completely
out there.
taken over. The only thing I've found, it does not like shade. That's the only thing. That's
Yeah.
about the only saving grace.
It'll certainly slow it down.
An annual tillage, like farmers where you farm, but that's it. And there's
If you till it though, you're going to spread it.
right,
Yeah.
and there's
Does
there's
MDOT
other.
spray it
I won't-
in the right of ways.
They do. You'll see a dead circle. It's always in a circular
Yeah.
pattern when
Like
we're driving
patches
down to the
everywhere.
beach and stuff. You see it. Some states are better than others. It seems, but I mean, yeah,
It's everywhere.
you can go up to Iowa, and there's the same story about another species up there. It's not just Cogongrass. It's
This is the worst
different.
one I've ever seen,
Yeah,
Yeah.
as far as hard to kill.
It's scary to think what the coastal plain could look like in 100 years if we can't get a hold of it.
yeah, for sure.
Oh well,
Might be
sorry
too
to
late
distract
already.
us about it, but I knew that was an invasive
Yeah.
of note,
Well-
and
He's on the top 10 list for sure.
It's top 10 globally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If y'all allow me, I won't say much about this, but the anger you just had towards Cogongrass, that's the anger I have towards invasives or plants with invasive tendencies still being planted, and that's why I'm so passionate about it, because we should have learned our lesson from all these things that we've planted in the past. Like I mean, how come we haven't? I mean,
yeah, that's a
crazy.
debate topic
And
of
selling
debate.
it at Home
So,
Depot.
how do you determine that something maybe that's not native to here could be greatly beneficial versus something that would become invasive? It just seems like so many invasive things that like came out of the Far East type, almost.
And it's not all non-natives aren't invasive, but there's definitely
right.
invasive non-natives, and they can have different invasive tendencies. But I don't know. They just don't. For the most part, most non-natives. I mean, our insects can't use them, and our wildlife aren't adapted to using them. But so native species, I think, feel like are always the better option and safest option.
Safest option for sure.
Well, the best way to make sure is just propagate what's already on your place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. And I've had people message me. They're like, soybeans are non-native, and I'm like, yeah, but you plant them, and they're not going to be here forever.
Yeah, they're not going to naturally expand. That's
if they
the
plant
difference.
themselves the next year, farmers would save a lot of
Well,
money.
then you would have something with maybe the highest nutrient content possible for deer.
Yeah.
It would never take over because they're going to control it for you.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Dudley was one telling me about there were some native plants in this country that were like soybeans, almost like a wild soybean, but the expanded deer herds wiped them out pretty much now. Right?
Well, that's because we have so many native legumes. But.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's not going to spread if you don't plant it, so stick with something that's proven and native. But we just lost Lanny. He's got an important phone call at 3.
He does. Very important. I might have to be with him, but
I don't, I could talk about this kind of stuff for the next 3 weeks, but, and we'd love to get y'all back.
For sure.
Well, I've created a whole platform on just talking about it. So
right.
I could talk about it for years, hopefully.
Are you ready do you want to do the rapid fire? Okay. Well, I don't know if you guys know this, but, we try to do a rapid fire for all of our guests, and, we just ask you questions quickly in succession. It's just kind of a fun way of getting to know y'all better and letting our listeners get to know y'all better. So, if y'all want to do every other one, you can, or just one of y'all, you let me know.
Let them blurt it out at the same time. I want to see them say a different answer.
Okay, well, this will be
funny.
This will be fun. Okay,
Might even get an argument out of them.
And if you want to say neither or both, you can do that on a few of them as well. Okay. All right, are you ready? Loblolly pine or mixed forest?
Mixed forest.
Yeah.
Leonard Skinnerd or George Jones?
Skinner.
Yeah, I don't know. Skinner's close. I don't know. I listen to him more. So.
All right, grits or oatmeal?
Grits for sure.
Oh, we got a disagreement.
Deer meat or turkey meat?
Turkey.
Deer.
Is there diversity?
Sweet, unsweet, or water?
Oh, sweet.
It's sweet. Yeah, I mean.
Big game or small game? Hunting.
Turkey's big game, man.
Big game.
Yeah, big game.
Walk and hunt or sit and hunt?
Walk and hunt.
Yeah, walking. I can't sit.
Bank fish or boat fish?
All the above.
But I like bank.
Pecan or pecan? Is that how you?
Pecan.
Coyote or coyote?
I say both, but coyote usually most.
Bradford pear or Cleveland select?
Neither.
That's
Neither.
the right answer.
All right. Lastly, Smokey the Bear or Bob the Burner?
Oh,
Burner
my
Bob.
goodness.
All right. Good answers.
Bing.
I don't know if y'all know Burner Bob the Burner.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's like I know y'all know about it, but Smokey the Bear came along years ago to try to convince people not to use fire on the landscape.
It was more to stop wildfires, but you know how the public
the public
misinterpret
changed it.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden this Bob the Burner guy came along, and he's got his own suit and everything, and he promotes fire, good fire. That's pretty cool.
Yes.
But do we have a trivia question, or do we have an advertisement?
We do have a trivia question. So normally we ask our guest a question, and if you get it right, then one of our listeners who left a review gets a prize. And so the prize this week will be a Mossy Oak Allen backpack, and the reviewer is Bradley D3601. Thanks for leaving us a review. So I have a pretty teed up question. So and you have a phone a friend sitting next to you on the couch.
Yeah, no pressure.
But the question is, what is the Alabama state tree?
That's near and dear to my heart. The longleaf pine.
Yep.
That's
right.
it.
Jake's in longleaf country, so
Oh
he
man,
he loves it.
that's an incredible tree. I grew up hunting where there was a native stand of them.
Oh wow, yeah.
I don't know if the
that's
Longleaf
special.
Alliance
Clark
is still
County?
around, but
Yep.
that's another good organization.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
They are.
yeah. I
Longleaf
think
Alliance.
they work with Burner Bob
Yeah.
a lot, and you know the
You can't hurt them either.
yeah I know it.
You
Yeah,
can burn them to a
yeah,
crisp.
yeah.
It's amazing.
Even you know the when they're in the grass stage, you know these things are sitting there, and you run this hot head fire over them, and they're just this little black bump sitting right there.
Something
on
like
the
a
ground.
cartoon.
Yeah, it's like there's no way this thing's going to make it, and sure enough, those
like it,
needles.
yeah.
Yeah, they do. So it's crazy.
Cool species. You know,
Yes.
they've got them from the lower coastal plain, and then they've got that montane variety.
So that's where I grew up in the Piedmont, and so it's kind of like the North Georgia and North.
Yeah, I remember
Eastern
for
Alabama.
For dendrology, they took us to Alabama to some, you know, really rocky upland stuff in the Bankhead Forest, and showed us, you know, montane. Is that like Spanish for mountainous or something?
Yeah.
But you know, so they can handle coastal sandy soils, and they can grow up on top of rocky mountains. There's just different varieties.
They
of
can
them.
live forever. I once got to go and kind of tour and hunt for a couple of days on the largest contiguous stand in the country down there in South Alabama. The Miller family owns.
Yeah.
I think it was 69,000 acres in one tract, all longleaf.
My goodness.
Unbelievable,
That'd
and it
be
was
awesome.
so cool.
Yeah.
Just like you know 4-county area of quail plantation look.
That's
you know,
crazy.
all the old. You know, it was just thinned down to just old big trees. You know, everywhere.
Was there any wildlife there?
Oh gosh, turkeys like crazy.
You don't have to worry about your smoke when you're burning on the
Yeah.
No, you're right.
Yeah. That's awesome.
It was incredible.
Well, that was a good discussion. Did we learn anything today?
Burn, baby, burn for sure. I could have told you that though. You learn that the best of us in caring for the stuff God gave us pay attention to everything and aren't just like selfishly trying to gain one thing from it, you know. And I'm not saying, you know, I might selfishly be trying to get a great duck hunting place for me, for my family, for my kids or whatever. But the best of us is what we should look up to, and that's these guys, because they care about everything going on. And so that's what I learned today, and I think it gets reinforced. We have quite a few in the halls here that are, I would put in that category, but especially you guys. So thank you for bringing that awareness. We're not going anywhere as a society without that increased awareness of all this stuff God gave us and how to take care for it. And there's such a blind spot on so much of this. I know that's why y'all got so fascinated with it.
Yeah.
You know, because not only you had your blind spot, but you knew so many others did. So thank you for what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just,
appreciate it.
you know, it just reiterated, never quit being curious about all this stuff and trying to learn. You know, keep an open mind, listen to what everybody has to say.
That leads to a great life. You know, we just lost Coach Leach, and they talked about he was an amazing person, and he made everyone better because he had this innate curiosity all the time. And then we just lost one of my very best friends ever, Mr. George Bryan, and that same thing at his funeral. He was so curious about everything and everybody. And it just led to helping everyone around them, not just their own curiosity. So that's a great point, Dudley.
Yeah. And speaking of Mr. Bryan, we need to go look at the golf course with the two of y'all.
Yes.
Or all of us.
You
and
should. Yep.
Yeah.
Look at the rough that we did. It's pretty cool. So
It's really
Yeah,
cool.
we'd love to see it.
I think I'm supposed to say goodbye, but say goodbye, Mac.
Goodbye, Mac.
Get us out of here, Dudley.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the GameKeeper Podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to GameKeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.